is no disagreement between us on universal coverage for health care. The disagreement is, where do we start from and where do we end up? The Republicans want to repeal the Affordable Care Act. I want to improve it. I want to build on it, get the cost down, get prescription drug costs down. Senator Sanders wants us to start all over again. This was a major achievement of President Obama, of our country. It is helping people right now. I am not going to wait and have this plunge back into a contentious national debate that has very little chance of succeeding. Okay. Let's make the Affordable Care Act work for everybody.
Listen, Chuck, this is a good discussion here. Yes, and let me just say this, as Secretary Clinton may know. I am on the Health Education Labor Committee. That committee wrote the Affordable Care Act. The idea that I would dismantle health care in America while we're waiting to pass a Medicare for all is just not accurate. The Affordable Care Act has clearly, as Secretary Clinton made the point, done a lot of good things. But what it has not done is dealt with the fact that we have 29 million people today who have zero health insurance. We have even more who are underinsured with large deductibles and co-payments, and prescription drug prices are off the wall. So I do believe that in the future, not by dismantling what we have here, I helped write that bill, but by moving forward, rallying the American people, right, I do believe we should have health care for all.
All right, thank you both. Rachel.
Secretary Clinton, Senator Sanders is campaigning against you now, at this point in the campaign, basically by arguing that you are not progressive enough to be the Democratic nominee. He has said that if you voted for the Iraq War, if you are in favor of the death penalty, if you wobbled on things like the Keystone Pipeline or TPP, if you said single-payer health care could never happen, then you're too far to the right of the Democratic Party to be the party's standard bearer. Given those policy positions, why should liberal Democrats support you and not Senator Sanders?
Well, because I am a progressive who gets things done. And the root of that word, progressive, is progress. But I've heard Senator Sanders' comments, and it's really caused me to wonder who's left in the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Under his definition, President Obama is not progressive because he took donations from Wall Street. Vice President Biden is not progressive because he supported Keystone. Senator Shaheen is not progressive because she supports the trade pact. Even the late, great Senator Paul Wellstone would not fit this definition because he voted for DOMA. You know, we have differences, and honestly, I think we should be talking about what we want to do for the country. But if we're going to get into labels, I don't think it was particularly progressive to vote against the Brady Bill 5 times. I don't think it was progressive to vote to give gun makers and sellers immunity. I don't think it was progressive to vote against Ted Kennedy's immigration reform. So we can go back and forth like this, but the fact is, most people watching tonight want to know what we've done and what we will do. That's why I am laying out a specific agenda that will make progress, get more jobs with rising incomes, get us to universal health care coverage, get us to universal pre-K, paid family leave, and the other elements of what I think will build a strong economy that will ensure that Americans keep making progress. That's what I'm offering, and that's what I will do as president.
Senator Sanders, to that charge, how do you establish a list of what it means to be a progressive that is unrealistic?
No, not at all. Here's the reality of American economic life today. The reality is that we have one of the lowest voting turnouts of any major country on earth because so many people have given up on the political process. The reality is that there has been trillions of dollars of wealth going from the middle class in the last 30 years to the top 1/10 of 1%. The reality is that we have a corrupt campaign finance system which separates the American people's needs and desires from what Congress is doing. So to my mind, what we have got to do is wage a political revolution where millions of people who have given up on the political process stand up and fight back, demand a government that represents us and not just a handful of campaign contributors. Now, all of the ideas that I'm talking about, they are not radical ideas. Making public colleges and universities tuition free, that exists in countries all over the world, used to exist in the United States. Rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure and creating 13 million jobs by doing away with tax loopholes that large corporations now enjoy by putting their money into the Cayman Islands and other tax havens. That is not a radical idea. What we need to do is to stand up to the big money interests and the campaign contributors. When we do that, we can, in fact, transform America.
Thank you, Senator.
I just want to follow up on a comment that Secretary Clinton said, Senator. You know, President Obama has not called for abolishing the death penalty. President Obama is for the big Asian trade deal known as TPP. And just yesterday you said you can't be both a moderate or a progressive, but you can't be both. Is President Obama, in your judgment, based on these policy positions, a progressive?
Let me just pick up on this point. This whole discussion began because I commented, not making an overall evaluation about the secretary. She was in Ohio, I think, in September or November. And she got up and said something like, I have been, I'm paraphrasing, I have been criticized because people think I'm a moderate. Well, I am a moderate. That's where this came from. It wasn't me paraphrasing her. It is what she said. And all that I said is nothing wrong with being a moderate. But you can't be a moderate. You can't be a progressive. In terms of President Obama, I think if we remember where this country was 7 years ago, 800,000 jobs being lost every month, $1.4 trillion deficit, the world's financial system on the verge of collapse. I think that President Obama, Vice President Biden, and the Democratic leadership in the House and the Senate have done a fantastic job. We are in much better shape today than we were 7 years ago, although my Republican colleagues seem to have forgotten where we were 7 years ago. That's the fact. But we still have a very long way to go. Do I think President Obama is a progressive? Yeah, I do. I disagree with him on a number of issues, including the trade agreement. But, yes, I think he has done an excellent job.
Well, Chuck, if I could, you know, in the very first debate, I was asked, am I a moderate or a progressive? And I said, I'm a progressive who likes to get things done. And cherry picking a quote here or there doesn't change my record of having fought for racial justice, having fought for kids' rights, having fought against the kind of inequities that fueled my interest in service in the first place, going back to my days in the Children's Defense Fund. It certainly didn't stop me from taking on the drug companies and the insurance companies before it was called Hillary Care. It was called, before it was called Obamacare, it was called Hillary Care because we took them on. And we weren't successful, but we kept fighting, and we got the Children's Health Insurance Program. And every step along the way, I have stood up and fought and have the scars to prove it. So, again, I think it's important that, look, I understand Senator Sanders is really trying to distinguish himself. I understand that. That's what you do in campaigns. But at the same time, let's not be, in I think, an unfair way, making an accusation or making an attack about where I stand and where I've always stood. And it is fair to say, Senator, that in your definition, as you being the self-proclaimed gatekeeper for progressivism, I don't know anyone else who fits that definition. But I know a lot of really hard-fighting progressives in the Democratic Party who have stood up time and time again against special interests, against the powerful, on behalf of those who are left behind and left out. And that's what we ought to be celebrating. Let's talk about what we would do as president and commander-in-chief to make sure the progress continues into the future.
30 seconds, and then we'll move on.
That's right. I mean, instead of arguing about definitions, let's talk about what we should do. And one of the things we should do is not only talk the talk, but walk the walk. I am very proud to be the only candidate up here who does not have a super PAC, who is not raising huge sums of money from Wall Street or special interests. I am enormously proud. Never believed it would happen. that we have raised $3.5 million individual contributions averaging $27 apiece. That is what the political revolution means.